Beautiful people! Welcome to the launch of Samantha's 70s. We're finally doing it. Thank you so much for joining me tonight. And check this out before I sit down. This was the outfit that almost all of you chose when I was trying to figure out what to wear for the author photo that I did. So I wanted to wear this again tonight. And check this out. Whoops. I don't know if I can get my leg up high enough. Flared legs. All right. So we are discoed out. Let me sit my butt down. Hello, everybody. Thank you again for being here for the launch of Samantha's 70s, which literally just came out. I was sweating it for a little bit there because the Amazon process was taking longer than I figured. And I wasn't even sure that there was going to be a book available to talk about tonight, but I'm really, my nerves are still up, but I'm very, very glad that it's available and that I won't sound like a fraud when I'm talking about this book. So, and that's what we're going to be doing here for the next hour or so. We're here on Facebook Live, and it's Saturday night, which is actually very appropriate in terms of the disco thing. I didn't plan it that way in terms of putting a book out on Saturday. I just wanted to put it out on the 17th because of Samantha's 70s. I wanted to have a 7 in the date and weird that way. But it turns out that it's Saturday night, which is pretty cool, and I get to spend it with you guys. This book is pretty much how I spent all of my COVID time, sitting here writing. I guess if you're going to do anything in quarantine, you might as well do something creative. Honestly, I've been planning this since last year. And originally, the idea was to have this finished by late June so that it could be out in time for Bewitched Fanfare, which was originally supposed to happen in Salem this past June. And then that didn't happen because of COVID. And then it was going to happen on Labor Day. So the idea was to have the book finished by Labor Day. But then, unfortunately, we had to reschedule again. So it actually kind of worked out in terms of the book because it gave me a little extra time to get it just the way I wanted it. And if you're a perfectionist like me, that takes a while. So let me tell you a little bit about how Samantha's 70s came to be. If you saw my promotion video there where I made myself do this in the bathtub because I'm also an actor and that's kind of what I do. That's like, give me a chance to dunk myself in a bathtub on camera and I'll do it. But as I said in that video, when I wrote I, Samantha, Take This Mortal Darren, it was supposed to be the end. There really wasn't anything else to say, especially if you've read that book and you know how dense the storyline is because of what has to happen there with Samantha fighting the Witches' Council and the mortals in Samantha's life discovering that she's a witch. And once that wraps up, it's like, where do you go? And so I didn't think there was really anything else to say beyond that. And that really was supposed to be the end of it. But see, then I was I taking a shower or something? I get the weirdest ideas in there. And you guys know about the Tabitha series and how Tabitha was supposed to be aged to a 25-year-old, even though chronologically she was only supposed to be 11. And I had this thought, wouldn't it be funny if we saw, if we saw Tabitha wake up in 1977 and say, Mother, I had the strangest dream. I dreamt that I was a weather girl at this TV station and I was 25 years old and I had this yellow car and oh my God, it was so real. And that's how my mind works. And I thought, haha, very funny. And that was kind of the end of it. But over the course of the next several months, I started having other ideas and then more ideas and then more ideas. And it's kind of like the episode, And Then I Wrote, where Samantha zaps up the Civil War characters and they're all telling her what they think she should write. And it was very much like that, not only with I, Samantha, but with this book. And I kept thinking, how can I possibly get all of these characters that we love, that would be incomplete if I left one out, into one story? And where in the 70s do you do it? And what kind of story can you tell with that many people? And I thought, this is not going to work. And but where there's a witch, there's a way. And it dawned on me that after 1972, when Bewitched ended, there were 7 other years in the 70s to work with. and that's where Samantha's 70s came from. 7 supernatural sagas about the Stephens doing the dazzling days of disco. Yes, I had to remind myself of my own logo there. So each story takes place in a separate year from 1973 through to 1979. And that allowed me to tell different stories, which include some groups of characters and some not. And that way everybody got a chance to say something. And I really do believe that it was Samantha and Darren and everybody telling me what they wanted to say. And I could hear their voices in my head as I was writing it. So I hope that that translates to all of you guys. I didn't want to tell the same kinds of stories that Bewitched did, though. Not that they're not great stories, but there was definitely a shtick, if you will. Samantha promises to give up witchcraft. Darren gets spells cast on him by Endora and other relatives. Larry is greedy and constantly wants to fire Darren if he doesn't do what he says, things like that. And all of those worked great in the context of the series, but that isn't what I wanted to do. I wanted to, like with I, Samantha, I wanted to take the established, not norms, but the established storyline and characters and viewpoints that we were left with and build on them. And I felt like I, Samantha did do that, especially, I, Samantha does the thing that Bewitched never did, which was to definitively let the mortals in Samantha's world know that she's a witch, and that they ended up, at least in that moment, okay with it. At least in that moment. But that was just a natural evolution. Things couldn't go back to the way they were. They had to move forward. And of course, the 70s, if you remember those, I certainly do. I was a kid. There was an evolution that was happening there too, with society and just the world, really. I mean, not unlike today, but at least then it was kind of moving forward. So I wanted to move on, and I didn't want to just follow the self-contained sitcom format. I wanted there to be more continuity. I wanted there to be maybe something gets brought up in 1973 that doesn't resolve until 1978, things like that. So it's not just, you could pick up any episode and just watch it, which is great too, but they're all linked in one way or another. So I hope that will work for you. I also wanted to get into the mechanics of witchcraft because that really fascinates me. And the fact that Tabitha and Adam have half witch, half mortal metabolisms, which I think is very interesting. I wanted to get more into the character backstories and what makes these folks tick and show their evolution as people, whether witch or mortal, so they don't just stay in the same place. Now, like I said, I, Samantha was very dense with detail because I felt like it had to be, because it was a series finale, and of course, there were all like hundreds of references to past episodes and things like that. That happens here too in Samantha's 70s, but I feel like the story flows a little bit better. Like at least at first, there are a lot of attention to those kinds of details, but as we move on, the stories can take on their own sort of evolution, and you don't have to rely as much on this happened in that episode or that happened in that episode. Although there are tons of references and Easter eggs galore, some of which I don't make specific reference to. I just throw them in. So you'll have to see if you can pick up on those. Now, of course, there are tons of references to episodes here as well. And in I, Samantha, I created endnotes at the back of the book, because I thought that would be easier. It wouldn't clutter up, the actual story. But I felt like even for myself, it was kind of a pain to have to flip back to the back of the book every time there was a number at the end of a sentence. So now I have footnotes rather than endnotes, and they're on the actual page, and you can go back and look at an episode where a reference comes from. Sometimes stuff is built off of an observation I made in the Bewitched Continuum. Sometimes it's to remind you that something came out of I, Samantha, Take This Mortal Darren. So I wanted to be very clear on what was my story, what was Bewitched story, and who created what. Because I think that's important. I don't want to be taking credit for things that I did come up with, especially some stuff that happened before I was even born. Um, this book, Samantha's 70s, is actually twice as long as I, Samantha. That wasn't the original intention. I kind of wanted to write something shorter. This is about 200 pages. That was my original intention, but again, Samantha and everybody had a lot that they wanted to say, so the book actually is twice as long. But again, I really do think that they were feeding me what they wanted to say. And with 7 different stories, I feel like it's not static, and they're also kind of like a series of reunion movies. So, so there's that. Hello, Anna, and hello, David. Happy birthday. Hope you're having fun. I can't see everybody's comments. Dewey, oh, hi, Dewey, and Sherilyn, Michael's TV tray, and Justin, and June. Oh, cool. Hi, June. And anyhow, let's move this on here. I've never really done this before, so I'm kind of looking at the comments as I go and figuring this out. I also want to mention that I don't consider my Bewitched books canon. To me, my stories are just kind of my imaginings. We didn't see them on the air. They're not officially the part of the story. They're just my imaginings. And to be perfectly honest, I don't consider the Tabitha series canon either. Scandalous? Maybe. But I don't, so just kind of pretend to that. Oh, for each of the 7 stories, you might notice that each one's title comes from the spell, or comes from a line incanted in a spell at some point in the series, which wasn't easy because not many of the lines in the spells, especially in the early seasons, lend themselves to titles, but they kind of ended up fitting perfectly, and some of them even helped push along what the story was going to be. Now, full disclosure, for the purpose of this reading, I did edit some of the story portions together so that I could get across what I felt needed to get across here. I didn't rewrite anything. I just stitched a few things together. So some of what you're going to get when you get Samantha's 70s is going to read a little bit differently than what you'll hear from me tonight. A more fun disclosure, I mentioned the Easter eggs, lots of sly references. I hope you will get a smile out of them because that was absolutely my intention in including them. And the last general note, I went back and researched a bunch of stuff from the 70s for this. I mean, not that I didn't live through them, as I said, but it was a long time ago. And I wanted the details to be accurate and also part of the atmosphere and the story. Hi, Sean. I see you. I'm sorry, I got lost in my own notes here. I know these details bring back a lot of memories for me, and I hope that they're going to too. Now, let's actually get into what the book is storyline-wise. The first story is called Mortals Who in the Circle Be. It takes place in 1973. And the biggest challenge, as I said, was how to pick up from I, Samantha, since that ended with the mortals in Samantha's world finding out that she's a witch. I mean, how that would be like a whole different series, right? Because Bewitched was about keeping that secret. Hi, Lisa. I felt like I was saying hi to Tabitha's sister, Lisa. Sorry about that. So the mortals, as I said, generally stand behind her in the moment at the end of the celebration. But how would the same mortals feel about Samantha being a witch once they had a chance to get used to the idea? I didn't want everybody to just move on as if nothing happened, because again, that's self-contained and this was too big a story point. I also didn't want to go the other way and have something dire happen from somebody having this knowledge, because that would be too much of a drama, but it had to be addressed. So Mortals Who in This Circle Be starts with the repercussions in the Stevens family unit. I mean, could you really have Darren still objecting to witchcraft completely at this point? Could you just have Samantha being free to use her powers whenever she wanted? What about the kids? None of those stories worked for me. So instead, I wanted to find out how Samantha and Darren and Adam and Tabitha made the adjustment under their own roof. From there, we branch out to the mortals who are now aware of Samantha's witchcraft and find out how they're dealing with the revelation. It's told in a series of flashbacks covering the time I, Samantha ended to the beginning of Samantha's 70s. which is about a year and a half. So it's about from spring of 72 up to fall of 73. One of the other challenges with this story is that to tell it properly, more characters had to be included that might work for a single linear story, as I mentioned before. So this flashback device allows for that. These flashbacks are also told in sort of a circular fashion, like it goes from Samantha to Darren to Larry to Louise, like that. And I hadn't actually planned, because the story is called Mortals Who in This Circle Be. I didn't actually plan for the story to be told in a circular fashion, but it worked. I didn't really realize it until well into the writing of the story. We're also going to find out that some of our mortals have adjusted really well to knowing a witch. Some you may not expect. Others have adjusted too well. And others are still struggling. So I'm going to leave it to you to find out which mortal is which doesn't sound as good as which witch is which, but that can't be helped. The next story takes place in 1974 and is called Up from the Depths Where It Lies Sleeping. This is one of my favorites in that it's the first to move on from the new paradigm that our witches and mortals find themselves in. One where we can really just take off into a new kind of story. Now think back. Of all our full witch characters, who never came down with a witch disease? That's right, Aunt Clara. Now, if you haven't read I, Samantha, spoiler alert, Aunt Clara does make a triumphant return after being gone for 4 years at the end of that book. Second spoiler alert, since I, Samantha is now a prequel for Samantha's 70s, it also makes a good primer. Little Larry Tating. You're going to get more of that as we go on. So what happens here is that Clara has been spending a lot of time by herself since coming back, and she's trying to come to grips with her advancing age. Endora thinks her sister, I know there are differing thoughts as to whether Endora and Clara are sisters, but that's kind of my perception of it. Endora wants Clara to stay with Samantha and Darren. So she does. And on the first night that she's there at the Stevens house, Clara has a little bit of karma come back on her, which I think you'll understand after I read you this first excerpt from Samantha Stevens from the story Up from the Depths Where It Lie Sleeping. I wanted to have an actual proof copy to show off tonight, but it didn't end up happening. So I hope you'll forgive the lameness of reading from paper. I swear Samantha's 70s is real, at least as of a couple of hours ago. Hold on, that was a lot. All right, 1974. Aunt Clara sat in the Stevens guest room, her chair seeming like a throne with Adam and Tabitha crouched beside it. Having you here is dynamite, Tabitha told her great aunt, clapping her hands. She's really into good times lately, Samantha winked while she hung up the last of Clara's couture. And Adam has just started kindergarten. Oh, kindergarten, that's just wonderful, Clara exclaimed, holding her grandnephew. A garden full of children. What is that? It's sort of like entry-level mortal school, Samantha smiled. Adam in school already. Time sure flies, doesn't it? Then Samantha grimaced and breathed in through her teeth. Sorry, Aunt Clara. Well, one can't get around getting older, Clara replied, resolute, even though there's any number of ways to feel about it. Samantha still wanted to change the subject. I'm sure. Hey, listen, we were thinking that maybe after dinner we might all go out to the movies. That would be fun, Adam yelled. Aunt Clara was intrigued. You know, I haven't been to a movie theater since the jazz singer was playing. As it happens, I was reading through Darren's paper while you were making up the bed, and I perused the movie page. Anything you think you'd like to see? Samantha queried. I'm not sure, because I couldn't stop asking myself one question. Just how does one massacre a chainsaw? Giving her two children a look, Samantha simply answered, I'll have to explain that one to you later. Clara beckoned the kids closer. Anyway, dears, how is your witchcraft training progressing? Tabitha stood proudly. Real good. Last week I made myself invisible and everything. Adam looked cowed. I can only do stuff sometimes. Oh, I know that feeling, Aunt Clara related. But if you keep working at it, I have every confidence you'll catch up to your sister. To be young again, eh? I can still remember my youth like I lived it yesterday. What a time that was. Not that we didn't have our problems. Mortals were very territorial, and there were always disputes about borders. Plus, you had to be careful because they were very superstitious about witches. You never knew what they might do to you if they found you out. During the Salem trials, right? Tabitha offered. Yes, but long before that, too. You all are so lucky today. You can simply choose your mate. When I was young, women often had their mates chosen for them. I did buck that convention and many others in my girlhood. I guess you could say I had my moments. Samantha smiled. As I've always told you, Aunt Clara, I just bet you did. Were you a bad girl when you were young, Great Aunt Clara? Adam asked, fascinated. No, no, not bad, Clara clarified. A bit of a troublemaker, perhaps. Your grandmama isn't the only member of the family to possess that trait, which I know may be hard to believe, the witch added with a laugh. Oh, but when you get older, nothing's the same. Nothing's the same. Samantha was loath to let her aunt delve too much into self-pity, especially in front of Tabitha and Adam. Well, I think we're coming up on time to make dinner over here. Yay, the always hungry Adam whooped. It's nothing special, Aunt Clara. Just spaghetti with ragu sauce and meatballs, Samantha said. And Tabitha wants us to try something called Pop Rocks for dessert. They're new. They're out of sight, Tabitha commented. You put them in your mouth and it's like it fills up with sparkles. Yes, that would be lovely, Clara replied. Yet 'tis with most wondrous curiosity, aunt, I find it myself with a hankering for calf's foot jelly. What is that, mother? Tabitha asked, looking thoroughly de-appetized. You don't want to know, Samantha winced. Aunt Clara, what's with the Shakespeare lingo? You know Daddy has the family monopoly on the bard around here. Suddenly Clara looked more confused than her relatives. Len parmouille! Hariri! Mritan! What is she saying, Mommy? Adam was a little spooked. Samantha seemed to be searching her memory. I think that was Aramaic? And Clara, I appreciate your newfound talent for languages, but you're starting to scare me. Meka! Ikua! Clara insisted. Amenue! Emetent kamam tu! Neteru emsekeru! And with that, Clara's gaze became laser-focused on the wall, straight ahead of her. Her face relaxed, and she sat in her chair unmoved. She had gone catatonic. Something's wrong, Mother. We need to call Dr. Bombay, Tabitha entreated. Calling Dr. Bombay! Calling Dr. Bombay! Emergency, come right away! The room was eerily quiet. No doctor appeared. But Samantha nearly fell over in shock when someone else appeared in his place. The figure was covered head to foot in great hulking fur. It was a female who, to the mortal eye, looked to be in her early 20s, and she possessed long, bright red hair. It took Samantha a moment to recognize her. Though the woman was quite young, her face unmistakably had all of Aunt Clara's features. Samantha went white. Mother? Mother? That's right, 2 Aunt Claras. And did you notice the parallel? It's a flip on Clara creating 2 Jonathan Tates in Accidental Twins. But copying Clara is only the beginning of this story. You're going to get to find out more about where Clara comes from and the things she did in her youth, plus the things she's going to do in this second youth that she's been granted. Not only is she going to make up for a lot of lost time very quickly, but she's going to have a dynasty-style encounter with someone who may surprise you. So it's a lot of fun. But something that I really wanted to do with this story was to explore feelings around aging. I've had my own feelings as I settle into 51. Now imagine settling into being 3,900. So Aunt Clara was the perfect vehicle for that. And for us to realize that just because someone's elderly doesn't mean they don't have most of the same feelings and thoughts and desires that younger folks do, and that a higher number on your birth certificate does not mean that your life has to stop. If you're just joining us, you are watching the virtual book launch and reading of Samantha's 70s here on Facebook Live, which was just released today. Now let's move on to 1975. Back when Bewitched started, you may remember Darren came straight out and told Maurice that he and Samantha wanted to have a large family. Yet over 8 years of the series, The Stephens only had Tabitha and Adam, and that's okay. But it did beg the question, why didn't they have more kids? And what would happen at this point in their lives if Darren and Samantha found out that the stork might be on the way again? I really wanted one of these stories, at least, to focus on the Stephens family and their dynamic, and introducing the possibility of another baby became the way to do that. This story is called Hearken to the Heart's Desire. And it begins with breakfast in bed because it's June 6th, Samantha's birthday. But Samantha can't eat the wonderful breakfast that her husband and kids have prepared for her because she's nauseous, so she ends up admitting that she might be pregnant. Tabitha has one reaction. Darren and Adam have quite another reaction. So here, that I'm going to read you, let's pick up where Samantha is killing time before leaving for her appointment with Dr. Anton to find out if baby number 3 is on the way. Samantha had gotten a later than usual start. Before Darren had left for work and the kids for school, she had managed to get most of the wonderful breakfast they'd made for her down, but Darren thought she still seemed a little green and suggested that she go back to sleep. And go back to sleep she did. It was past 11 when she finally managed to roll out of bed. But she was having a hard time getting into her normal routine. She uncharacteristically left the breakfast dishes to their own devices in the sink and mindlessly went around dusting things for lack of knowing what else to do with herself until it was time to scoop up her children and head to Dr. Anton's. She barely even noticed when Endora popped in. And Endora was hard to miss in her long, light orange gown, sporting both bodice and bell sleeves encrusted with a rainbow of gems. "Hello, my darling," she said lovingly. "Happy birthday." "Oh," Samantha said, deep in thought. "Thank you, Mother." Endora frowned. "Is that the thanks I get after I flew all the way back from Burma just to bring you felicitations of the day?" Samantha did her best to shake herself out of her mood. "I'm sorry, Mother. Thank you," she said again, this time more genuinely. "I just have something on my mind today, that's all. I suppose you'll find out sooner than later, as well you should. I think you're going to become a grandmother again." The normally majestic Endora dropped that persona as the news registered, and delight spread on her face. "Samantha! You mean—" "That seems to be the typical response this morning," Samantha remarked. Something seemed off to Endora. "And this is the cause for your consternation?" "If I remember right, consternation was what I got from you when you learned I was pregnant with Tabitha." "You may also recall at the time I felt your having a child with Derek would forever tie you to him. But once I had a chance to absorb the shock, well, after all, I did celebrate with you when news of Adam broke." "That you did, with Daddy of all people." "So what happened?" Endora wants to know. "Dalton didn't rise to the occasion?" Samantha could only force out one word. "Well?" "Oh, I knew it!" Endora exclaimed. "Now don't get spun out, Mother," Samantha said, standing and hoping to quell Endora's temper before she made the roof collapse. "Darren just didn't react the way I expected he would. To tell you the truth, he really didn't say much of anything. I guess I caught him off guard. This did rather come out of nowhere." "Nonsense," Endora scoffed. "Maybe it was too early in the morning. Maybe I should have waited until the kids left for school and we were alone. That's it," Samantha reasoned. "The timing was wrong." "Derwood wouldn't know timing if Big Ben fell on him," Endora sassed. "Now, why didn't I think of that before Hepzibah placed an embargo on zapping your husband?" "Mother," Samantha replied with unexpected affection. She did realize her parent was only looking out for her. "It's not like Darren and I really talked all that much about having more children. I've just been thinking about it so much lately. I wonder, do we witches hear our biological clocks ticking the way mortal women hear theirs?" "In your case," Endora offered, "you are far too young to hear anything of the sort. Besides, you're not the first wife, witch or mortal, to unexpectedly find herself with child. You weren't planned either, you know." "You never told me that." "Oh, Samantha, did you really think your father and I were married all those centuries and suddenly decided to have a baby? It was something that happened one night when we both ended up in Bruges at the same time. But rest assured, as soon as I found out I was carrying you, you were most wanted by both of us." Samantha let that sink in. "I dare say, with the open marriage you and Daddy have, bearing children was probably at the bottom of your priority list. That also likely explains why I never had siblings. A tenderness came over Endora that Samantha couldn't say she had seen in her mother before. I did consider having more children after you were born. I especially fantasized about having another girl and naming her Minerva. Samantha contemplated. Could easily have been my name. Your father and I mulled over calling you Cassandra, but it didn't seem to fit you. How about this? If I really am pregnant, as it feels like I am, I'll add Minerva to the consideration pile. If! Endora rose from the couch and approached her daughter, who had migrated to the TV. You just told me that you... I said I think I'm pregnant. I won't know for sure until I get my test from Dr. Anton later this afternoon. Endora pursed her lips disapprovingly. Those mortal tests. Those mortal tests worked pretty well the first 2 times. The first 2 times I was told of your pregnancies after you confirmed them. Endora waved her hand, and a small peach-colored disc appeared between her fingers. It was only slightly bigger than a sweet tart. Behold, witch's pregnancy test technology. Samantha didn't seem convinced. That's a pregnancy test? Now it comes in a chewable, Endora said, sounding like a commercial. You simply eat it, and you'll know instantly if you're expecting. How? I don't recall that eating something like this worked out so well for Alice in Wonderland. Oh, don't be absurd. It's very simple. It contains the extract of the dancing plant, which grows in the jungles of Laos. Not the best place to harvest them these days, of course. The extract detects the hormones associated with pregnancy. And then what? My baby pops in and starts dancing? Nothing so drastic. You simply turn blue if you're expecting a boy and pink if you're expecting a girl. Samantha looked away. No, nothing drastic about that at all. The effect only lasts a moment, Endora promised, moving her open palm toward Samantha. And it's a variant of the test I myself took that told me I was carrying you, came Endora's final argument. Taking the wafer, Samantha studied it cautiously. All right, Mother, she finally decided. It wouldn't hurt to get a second opinion, so I just eat it. Samantha popped the candy-looking, potentially life-changing circle into her mouth. She was surprised how chewy it was and how flavorful. It took her a good 30 seconds to mash it down properly, and then she swallowed it. Samantha looked down at herself. Nothing's happening. I thought you said instantly. Give it another few ticks to work. Samantha was ready to give up, and just beginning to realize what a non-result would mean, when she felt a most peculiar sensation course through her body. Had she thought to describe it in that moment, she likely would have said it felt like a cross between a chill, a tingle, and being submerged in Alka-Seltzer. But she wouldn't have had time to articulate the sensation. The next thing she knew, everything about her, starting with her hair and ending all the way down at her feet, turned a bright blue. It's a boy, Endora hurrahed. It's a boy, Samantha echoed, barely audible. Then she caught sight of her blueness, and that reality superseded the one that the witch's test seemed to confirm. Mother, I hope you're right about this fading. I can't go to Tabitha and Adam's school looking like Violet Beauregard from Willy Wonka. Just relax. It shan't be much longer now. Endora was right. She had scarcely finished her sentence before Samantha's natural skin tone began to peek through the blue. A few seconds later, Samantha had been restored. Whew, that's a relief. For a moment, I thought I was going to have to get rid of half my wardrobe and only keep what color coordinated with the blue. Endora laid a hand on her daughter's shoulder. It was blue, Samantha. So it was. Samantha calmly turned and picked up the phone on top of the television, punching its buttons meaningfully. Who are you calling, Samantha? My husband. Whatever for? He more than anyone else has a right to know what this second test revealed, Samantha informed her mother pragmatically. I just hope he won't be more blue than my face was. Hi, Betty. This is Mrs. Stevens. Could I speak to Darren, please? Whether or not Samantha has another bun in the oven, she's asked me not to say. But hearken to the heart's desire is another chance for the Stevens family to evolve as Darren again faces the possibility of having another supernatural child. You remember how he reacted to that the first time. How Tabitha comes at the idea of being an older sister from a whole different age because she's much older now. And Adam deals with maybe having a younger sibling for the first time. If you're just joining us, you are watching the virtual book launch and reading of Samantha's 70s here on Facebook. Samantha's 70s was released just today. Hold on a second. All right. Now, what do you guys think of when you think of the year 1976? Many things, I'm sure, but I'll bet the bicentennial is at the top of your list. I remember it well. I mean, I don't remember the actual event. I was 7 years and 2 days old then, but I do remember it happening. I even had a pair of Liberty Bell pajamas. Try new Liberty Gel. I had a pair of Liberty Bell pajamas with 1976 all over it. I even included it in the book. So following that, what comes to mind when thinking of the bicentennial? That's right, freedom, democracy, the idea of America being one big melting pot. That's how we used to think of it. Remember? Maybe that's gone out of fashion a bit lately, but yeah, Sean, I made Aunt Clara bionic. Michael, thank you for my imitation of Medora. I felt like I did a better job with that than Clara. I didn't practice very much. Sorry. Anyway, democracy, freedom, the idea of America being one big melting pot. This was something that I wanted to make a theme in a story told in 1976 because I felt like it's really important right now. One thing that's very much alive this year, or at least has been given more voice than it used to, is, and I'm just going to say the word, not to get all serious, racism. Now, Bewitched never actually used the word themselves, but they certainly stood up against it. They were one of the first shows, if not the first show, to cast Black actors. They reminded us that all men are brothers, even if they're girls. Of course, as sisters at heart. Of course, the concepts of equality and inclusion were always there in every episode. And during the civil rights movement of all times, when the reminders were very much needed. Yeah, equal rights. Equal rights. That's what we're talking about here. Unfortunately, these reminders that Bewitched put into so many episodes are needed even more now, right now. In some ways, even more than before. Now, full disclosure, I realize I'm a white gay guy, and maybe I'm not the right person to be sitting here talking about racism or what that entails or how to prevent it. But I only have two platforms. One is the columns I write for SoapCentral.com, and the other one is this one. And no continuation of Bewitched would be complete, as far as I'm concerned, without exploring this issue the way the show did, or at least trying to. Yes, Dewey, they do. They do. It gets mentioned anyway, their 10th anniversary, and they do take a trip for their 15th anniversary in 1979. Glad you asked. Now, even though you never actually heard the word racism on Bewitched, you did hear another word, prejudice. And who showed the greatest prejudice on the show? Nope, not Darren. Surprise. It was the witches. Darren certainly held discriminatory views, especially in those first couple of seasons. But it was the witches. Most of them did engage in a certain kind of, dare I say it, supremacy. And there was a consistent bias with witches thinking that they were better than mortals. That came across all the time from the beginning of the show all the way to the end. Now, Samantha hit this the hardest that she ever had in I, Samantha, but her victory over the Witches' Council in preserving her marriage to Darren couldn't just be left to sit there after that happened. I knew that I wanted Darren to be the center of this story. And as the sole mortal that most of our witches deal with, Darren ended up being the catalyst for witches to explore their attitude toward mortals in a story I call Witches Are Good, Witches Are Dear. Like Mortals Who in This Circle Be, the 1973 story, it's told in flashback, set against the backdrop of the July 4th weekend in 1976. I wanted it to be a reflection of what behooves us all to do right now. Look inside ourselves, see in what ways we combat and perpetuate racism. In an effort to be accurate, I researched types of racism and what can be done to grow past it. And I hope I got it right. Again, I'm a white guy telling this particular story, so I can only say for sure, the only thing I can say for sure with it is that my heart was in the right place. As a result of Samantha's trial, there's been a movement in the witches' world to look into the similarities that witches have with mortals. Some witches show surprising willingness to at least peek past their long-held beliefs. Some aren't sure what to think. Still others refuse to budge. Does any of this sound familiar right now? Yeah, I thought so. But what it leads to here is a discovery that is true for all of us as it is for any fictional mortal or witch. Now, I realize this all sounds really heavy, but this is just the message. The delivery is pure fun with lots of witchiness and lots of craziness and lots of unexpected character interactions. People that come together that didn't on the show and didn't in I, Samantha. This bicentennial was yet another opportunity to bring in as many characters as possible into one episode, or even you could call it a two-parter, because the show itself would never have this many guest characters together. They just couldn't afford it, for one thing, and you could never squeeze that many into 25 minutes. I really felt that I had to tell this story. Witches are good, witches are dear, and I hope that you enjoy it. I'm not going to read from that one tonight. But you might remember at the beginning of all this, oh, thank you, Dewey. I try. At the beginning of all this, I said that Samantha's 70s was born out of an in-joke about Tabitha referencing the Tabitha series within the spectrum of Bewitched and not the Tabitha series. After all, it would be funny, right? Her saying, I woke up and had this dream and I was 25 and it was crazy. So in the soap world, we call that SORAS, soap opera rapid aging syndrome. Of course, that happened with Tabitha when the Tabitha series came out. And from what I understand, that is one of the biggest complaints about the Tabitha series, aside from the fact that it wasn't as effective as Bewitched was. It was okay, but most people couldn't accept that Tabitha would now be that much older. So for this story, Tabitha actually does age to a 25-year-old within the course of the Bewitched world, not the Tabitha world, and I call that story Make the Future Be the Present. Aside from an apparent vaccination for primary vocabulary itis, Tabitha also never experienced a witch illness on the show. And another thing that was never really addressed was the fact that Tabitha, like Adam, has both witch and mortal metabolisms. I find that concept super fascinating. All that stuff about the atmospheric continuum and how witchcraft works, it kind of hits a geeky sweet spot for me. So appropriately enough, in 1977, Tabitha jumps to 25-year-old, like I said, but not in a place that was in any way convenient for her. Because what kind of a story would that be if it was convenient? All right, 1977. Tabitha usually prided herself on her abilities with numbers. Her natural abilities, not the genius level kind her grandmother had endowed her with that exposed the family's witchdom to Mrs. Peabody the first time. Today, those same numbers only seemed to bounce off her head. The class was trying to learn the new metric system, and all the decaliters and decimeters were blurring together. Bicentennial minute. Not wanting to disrupt the could hear a pin drop class, Tabitha quietly rose from her desk and approached her teacher. Mr. Michaels, I'm sorry to bother you, but I'm just not feeling well. Could I go to the nurse? Having obtained the all-important pass, Tabitha collected her book bag, which seemed twice as heavy as usual, as well as her purse, and started the one-way trek toward the nurse's office. Halfway there, she passed a restroom. It seemed like a refuge that was suddenly coaxing her toward it. She didn't know what was wrong, only that she was going to have to call her mother to come get her. She set her belongings down by the sink and caught her reflection in the mirror. Tabitha cringed. She was definitely not meeting her own standards today. Perhaps a touch of makeup, which she had just started wearing a little of the year before, would help her feel better outwardly, if not inwardly. But first, the water dripping out of the poorly maintained faucet seemed particularly inviting. Tabitha turned the faucet and was amused by the fact that she had just done something similar a few hours ago with her brother's witchy waterworks. The H2O indeed felt good, splashed against her face. At least until she began to feel the strangest sensation coursing through her body, starting down in her toes and traveling all the way up to her head. It was as if for a moment all the muscles in her body were stretching without her exerting herself in the least. Blinking the water out of her eyes while bent over the sink, Tabitha smoothed her face and suddenly noticed the hands doing so were noticeably bigger. Not totally dry, she saw that the mirror could not be sending the right image back to her. She was a grown-up. No longer a junior high student on the low end of teendom, Tabitha now stood several inches taller, and she possessed the face of a young woman. She looked to be in her early 20s, if not mid-20s. Instinctively looking down at herself, she caught sight of another part of herself that had grown. "Oh, my stars and satellites," she gasped, cupping the new, more noticeable arrivals. Having shocked herself out of her astonishment with the sound of her own deeper voice, Tabitha realized she was wasting water by letting the faucet run, so she turned off the tap. She also realized for the first time that she might not be alone in the bathroom. She turned in near panic and checked the bottom of each stall. Thankfully, no other feet occupied them. "What just happened to me?" she again said aloud, catching herself. It wouldn't do for anyone else to hear her self-conversation. Studying her image, Tabitha saw that her blouse and flared slacks hadn't made the transition with her. Tabitha hoped her parents would understand why she was about to make the trip home the fast way. Tabitha zapped, but instead of now standing in her living room, she remained in the school restroom. "Maybe I can at least lengthen my clothes," she thought to herself. But the magical attempt was for naught. Her sleeves still stopped mid-forearm, and her slacks were, as she had heard some of the boys call pants that were too short, floods. But then she wasn't a Stevens for nothing, because the one thing she had learned as a Stevens was how to work around predicaments caused by witchcraft. She had certainly watched her parents do that dance all her life. Inspired, Tabitha rolled up her pant legs, creating makeshift knee-length shorts. Her blouse got the same treatment, with her simply rolling her sleeves up to her elbows and tying her shirt tails in a knot, exposing her midriff. As for her footwear, she'd have to tough it out. She couldn't run around this school barefoot with her shoes in her hand. She emerged from the bathroom, only to run nearly headlong into her teacher. "Oh!" she exclaimed without thinking. "Mr. Michaels!" The teacher responded politely, but with an overtone of defensiveness. "I'm sorry, ma'am. Do I know you?" "Why, no." Tabitha realized that Michaels did not recognize her, which was a good thing. "I saw your picture in the school paper. I'm so terribly sorry for my clumsiness." She tried to break away, but the man's radar said something was off. "That's quite all right. Can I offer any assistance?" "Oh, that's not necessary. I'm just looking for my daughter." Michael squared his eyes. "Aren't you rather young to have a daughter going to school here?" Tabitha bit her lip. For a girl so good at numbers, she hadn't done her math. She offered a forced little laugh and an even more forced little smile. "I meant my sister, of course. She forgot her history book at home, and she has a big test to study for, so I thought I would bring it to her here." Tabitha pat her book bag, which now seemed extra specially tiny on her shoulder. She hoped, between the bag and her clothes, that math teacher Mr. Michaels wouldn't correctly add 2 and 2. "But I've taken up enough of your time. I'm sure you have a class full of students simply thirsting for knowledge to get to." Tabitha's second escape was thwarted by the educator's helpfulness and suspicion. "This is my free period. What's your sister's name? I can help find out what class she's in." "Well, now, aren't you sweet?" Tabitha gushed phonily, stalling. "Her name, huh? Would you believe it's Cynthia?" She almost laughed, completing the surname. "Cynthia Octofish." She could still see the clay octopus she had made at preschool age and how her father had not been happy to learn his daughter had zapped it up. "Cynthia Octofish," Michaels repeated, baffled. "Yes!" Tabitha knew she had to get out of this, and inspiration was feeding her away how. "We're so proud of her. Cynthia is one of the top students here at Towners Elementary." Michael's face went blank. "This is Westport Junior High." Tabitha registered mock shock the way she had seen her mother do any number of times. "It is? Oh, well, no wonder I can't find her. Looks like I need to go back to school myself." She went into a too loud guffaw. "Thank you so much for your time. I'd best be on my way. Cynthia's liable to throw a tantrum if she doesn't get her book." Tabitha turned to walk away, but her too tight shoes were painful enough that she couldn't help going into a limp. "Maybe you should try better fitting shoes." Tabitha did a hair flip and showed off her feet. "Oh, I know, but they go so well with my ensemble." Quite an unusual ensemble. Tabitha was ready to throw down her bag and purse and just run already. "Isn't it?" she replied instead. "The latest from Europe. The baggy shorts make the whole outfit, really. Kind of like lederhosen, without the hosen. Well, thank you for your assistance." As she hobbled, the smile she kept on her face was more like a grimace. But it didn't matter, because Michaels finally gave up and started back toward his classroom. Reminder, Tabitha told herself through gritted teeth, never play 20 questions with a math teacher. She had just gotten her hands on the push bar to let herself out when she heard a voice she was well accustomed to. Well, thank you. If she's on this campus, I'll find her. Believe me. Samantha now stood alone, clearly cheesed. Where on earth, or beyond, could that girl be? Tabitha had come out of hiding, flailing her arms above her head to get Samantha's attention. It worked, but her mom only looked confused. The barefoot, sudden adult made a dash over to Samantha, trying to get through in a decidedly hushed tone. It's me, Tabitha. Mother, it's me. I'm sorry, what? I swear I'm your daughter. Tabitha realized she needed to take a different tack. When I was little, I sat Bobby the Bird out of the picture book and made Grandmama sick. And later you became the good fairy, or tooth fairy, or whatever that was. She went on in a near panic. Don't you recognize my clothes? You bought these for me at the back-to-school sale at Hinckley's. Tabitha? Samantha still seemed to be in disbelief, but it was true she was starting to see her child in this grown woman. It is you. But what happened to your clothes? And your shoes? I'll explain everything, I promise, Tabitha said breathlessly. But please, get me out of here before I run into anyone else. Admit it. You pictured Lisa Hartman during that sequence, didn't you? Yes, Joe, they had a Tabitha show in this series, which I mentioned a little bit earlier. Sorry, there was an interruption in the broadcast here. Yes, Cynthia Octafish. Don't ask me where that came from, because that was not planned. I think Tabitha just wanted me to say that. Again, if you're just joining us, and thank you for joining this new video, you're watching the virtual book launch and reading of Samantha's 70s, which just came out today, right here on Facebook Live, when it's not dead, like when my laptop restarts itself. I will edit this together into a full video tomorrow. For those of you who missed some of it. Tabitha's growth spurt is only what gets things going and make the future be the present. To help their daughters, Samantha and Darren have to make a trip through time to meet someone I guarantee you've never met on Bewitched before. And yet, she's not a stranger. How's that for a mystery? Also, starting from the book's very first pages, Adam has a problem of his own that was hinted at in the show's 8th season. And it comes to fruition here in 1977. Let's just say that Tabitha's predicament ends up helping her brother in that geeky, sweet spot way I was talking about before. Now, here's something that I mentioned in the Bewitched Continuum. In none of the show's 4 holiday episodes, 5, if you count the 2nd season rerun of A Vision of Sugar Plums, which I don't, we never saw both witches and mortals coming together. Ever. We never even saw either set of Tabitha's grandparents paying a visit. Well, guess who decided to fix that? It only makes sense that as the messages and themes of unity continue to develop over the course of this book, that witches and mortals celebrate Christmas under one roof. Now, again, I realize that couldn't actually happen on the show because it would have cost too much money to get all the guest stars together. And plus, during the show's run, none of the mortals we knew had confirmation that Samantha and her family were witches. So now that we're past that part, those little pesky details, I present to you this story, No Flesh of My Flesh Shall Be Forlorn. We're in 1978, and Samantha holds a big holiday gathering with both sides of the family for the first time. Now, as you might expect, you're not going to get this group together without some witchy mayhem happening. Entrances are made, some folks are properly shocked, and there are further efforts to bridge the differences between mortals and witches. But the real thrust of this episode is a conflict that I developed between Uncle Arthur and his son. Yeah, you heard me right. That family connection wasn't even my idea. It comes from Samantha's shopping spree in 5th season, where Cousin Henry is introduced. And Endora says, well, 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 the clown prince of the cosmos. Where's King Arthur? And so in the Bewitched Continuum, I came to the conclusion, and I could be wrong, but I came to the conclusion that Arthur is Henry's father. But as you never heard Arthur talk about Henry, that paved the way for some major resentment, as you can imagine, and a clash between the practical joking warlocks that happens here that, shall we say, leave some of the guests cold. Hope I can get my Uncle Arthur right. We're gonna try. And sorry, Henry, if I don't get this right. Endora's earlier dire prediction had been fulfilled. Just what we need. 2 of them. Cousin Henry, Tabitha squealed, remembering how much fun her rarely seen relatives won. Ah, that didn't make sense. Tabitha squealed, remembering how much fun her rarely seen relative was. That's what I get for looking to the next paragraph. Aw, kiddo, you're still a dreamboat, Henry raved. Darren knew his memory was failing him. Samantha? And Dora also sensed bewilderness in Phyllis and Frank. Sighing deeply, she said, This is my nephew, Henry, Arthur's son. His son? Darren and his parents issued forth at the same time. I get a lot of that, Henry grouched. Henry really did look so much like Arthur, it was uncanny. They both stood tall with thick shocks of brown hair, bearing distinctive oval faces. There was more of an openness to Henry's as opposed to Arthur's permanent sardonic expression, and Henry's eyes were brighter and bluer. Henry was even friendlier than his father, to an extent, but Samantha remembered how easily upset, like Arthur, Henry could get. I'm the best-kept secret in the universe, Henry pressed on. Not secret enough, growls Maurice, gulping down his eggnog. Uncle Maurice, you'll never get me to say uncle. How many times do we have to have that conversation, Hank? Arthur knew that using that sobriquet would annoy his son. Your mother and I got drunk one night at a party celebrating the founding of Helsinki. We didn't have a marriage or a relationship, and she wanted to be the parent. That was all agreed upon before you were even born. Call it what you want, Henry spat. I was a latchkey warlock. Don't make me pop Joyce Brothers in here, Arthur threatened, and Dora had had enough. Since you both insist upon acting like petulant toddlers, perhaps matching, permanently affixed pacifiers might be suitable. Look, Adam, Tabitha whooped, pointing at the clear patio doors, outside of which large flakes of snow were whooshing down. Oh, wow, it's really piling up now. Adam dashed to the window and managed to get there before Tabitha. Darren nudged Samantha. You win that bet. I was sure we'd have to fire up the TV to keep them occupied. Who says you have to be outdoors to enjoy a winter wonderland? Arthur proclaimed abruptly. He gently gestured in the air in front of them, and in a few seconds, light snowfall was happening throughout the entire downstairs level. When it alighted on the children's faces, all exterior happenings were forgotten. Oh, that's awesome, Adam cried. Frank and Phyllis nearly telepathically agreed that this wasn't the strangest thing they'd seen all evening, and then Dora decided she had to hand it to her brother. Nice touch, she congratulated. Oh, please, Henry objected. I taught him that trick just like I taught him everything else he knows about practical jokes. You remember, Sammy, me telling you about that when I visited here? Before Samantha could reply, Arthur sounded the angriest she could ever remember him sounding. Henry, no one wants to hear you throwing petty little snits over and over. Why don't you take some responsibility for your own miserable life for a change instead of pinning everything on me? I want you to take that big sourpuss of yours and vamoose so these people can enjoy their holiday. Henry didn't take kindly to being embarrassed in front of the kin he had been wanting to know better. Au contraire, mon père. I'm not leaving till I show you what a real winter wonderland is. Zapping furiously, Henry produced half a dozen or more white artificial Christmas trees, placing them around the room. They made Samantha's and Darren's tree look junky by comparison. How department store, Arthur sneered. A second-rate department store. He brandished his hands grandly, and constellations of colored lights encircled the living room. That's it, Endora glowered, standing up. I'm going somewhere where it's safe. Samantha's mother had given most of the others tacit permission to rise as well. The only ones who remained seated were George, Henry, and Arthur. Little Shadow, my kitty, Little Shadow even jumped out of Aunt Clara's lap and took off running. Is that the best you can do? Henry chortled. Pointing all 10 of his fingers toward the ceiling, the aggrieved warlock duplicated the aurora borealis above, its layers of greens and yellows and purples seemingly going on forever. I'll show you something, Arthur hissed. I'll always be on the zap quicker than you, Henry bragged. I'm done with this, Samantha said, now fully seeing red, and not just the red in the strings of lights Arthur had strewn everywhere. I want you to stop this preposterous competition and restore... Henry and Arthur conjured up at the same time. And then something very strange happened. There was an electrical charge in the room, as if the power the feuding father and son had admitted had merged somehow. Sparks popped in front of Darren, Phyllis, and Frank, startling them. A moment later, they had all been transformed into snowmen, coal for eyes, carrots for noses, and all. Now slowly rising themselves, both Arthur and Henry looked completely mortified. It was obvious that neither warlock had intended this outcome. "What have you done?" Samantha yelled. Damn, that's cold. If you're just joining us, you are watching the virtual book launch and reading of Samantha's 70s, which just came out today right here on Facebook Live. And we are heading into the home stretch. Thank you all for sticking with me and sticking through 2 videos. I don't have any more excerpts for you tonight, but I will tell you that the excerpt you just heard from No Flesh of My Flesh Shall Be Forlorn is not the only magical outing in this episode. By story's end, one witch makes a surprise appearance with happy news. One mortal arrives to potentially heal a rift opened several years earlier as a result of Samantha's powers, or not as a result of Samantha's powers. Last but not least, that brings us to 1979, which I remember very well, perhaps too well, but that's a whole nother Oprah. At the end of I, Samantha, Take This Mortal Darren, 2 witches who had known each other but never really had a meaningful conversation connected. As it turns out, the identity of one of those supernaturals is given away by the virtue of the title of this final story, Come to Me, Dr. Bombay. That's right. Did you ever think you'd see our nurse-loving quack getting married? Yeah, okay, so he did that at the end of the Tabitha series, but again, that doesn't count. This love connection here in Samantha's 70s is not only rooted in my previous book, but the show itself, although it was only touched on briefly in one episode, and that episode was Make Love Not Hate, where Samantha briefly tried to do a love match between Esmeralda and Dr. Bombay, which obviously didn't happen, but it starts to happen here. Oh, I gave Esmeralda away. I wasn't supposed to do that. Anyway, okay, so now you know it's Bombay and Esmeralda. And so what's going to happen when you get Witchdom's most gregarious doctor and one of the Witchdom's most shyest witches ready to walk down the aisle? Well, you're going to get a very demure bridal shower, a very outrageous bachelor party, and hey, you know what? It's my soap roots. You can't write about a wedding without the wedding being in jeopardy. And I'm not going to lie, the wedding will happen. But Dr. Bombay and his lady love are going to have to dig deep to reach each other, one more than the other. But you can guess from the title who's going to have to work harder. And you know, we never did see a witch wedding on Bewitched, and I thought it might be fun to create one. It took a little bit more study than I anticipated. I studied Victorian customs. I studied both pagan and Wiccan rituals. Of course, the way mortals get married, and invented a little bit about the way I envisioned that witches would get married. And is it awful if I say that the wedding came out really beautifully? Again, I was just taking dictation. I was a conduit. That's all I have to say about that. I hope that you will enjoy this wedding as well. And I do want to mention that one witch who made a single appearance in the show as one kind of personality, she came to me and she asked if she could have her character fleshed out. So for this wedding, she plays a very important and pivotal part. Now, this witch didn't get a first name on the show, but I thought she should have one. As you know, witches, naturally, most of them, their names end in an A on the show, and I wanted to follow that tradition. At first, I had trouble with it because, you know, how could I have something that sounds witchy and unusual? I got stuck. But then I remembered my own mother's name, which ends with an A, and that name is Hendrika. Hendrika, it's a Dutch name, and I thought it would be kind of a neat homage, while also giving this fictional witch we know an actual identity. I hope she likes it when she reads it. My mom, that is. I don't know about Hendrika the witch. She'll have to get back to me. And so, finally, comes the end of this virtual launch and reading for Samantha's 70s. after all these months of just picturing the book and its release in my head, it's been very, very surreal, but very cool to finally have the book out and to finally get to present it to you guys. Thank you for watching this virtual launch. I want to thank all of you, again, who spent part of your disco Saturday night, especially those on the Central and Eastern time zones where it's a little on the light side. You know what, where I live here in Prince Edward Island, Canada, it's actually an hour later than Eastern time, so I guess I should thank myself too. It really is the witching hour. There's a lot of people who deserve thanks for this book even happening. But for brevity's sake, I'm going to lob a domo arigato at Blair Sweeney and the folks at Technomedia for their work on the book cover. Excuse me. And also thank you to Mark Simpson, the organizer of the Bewitched Fanfare events. I want to thank him for the Dark Victory. Mark, you know what I'm talking about. Speaking of Mark Simpson, I, and David Pierce, I see you there. He is the author of the Bewitched history book. All three of us co-host Twitch Talk, which is a web series where we break down Bewitched episodes with a spirited panel. And we always have a witchy good time. Always. Look for Twitch Talk on YouTube, where new episodes are posted on select Thursday nights. And those same episodes are posted on the Twitch Talk Facebook page on the following Fridays. If you want to join us, be part of the panel, send an email to bewitchedfanfare@gmail.com. And as for Bewitched Fanfare, which I mentioned early on, it has been on hold because of COVID, but we are planning to finally celebrate the 50th anniversary of the show filming in Salem. In Salem, of course, is going to be in Salem, May 6th through the 8th of 2021. Yeah, it's a year late, but let's just call it a tick of the universal talk. Visit bewitchedfanfare.com for details and tickets, and with any luck, we will all be able to get together in May to expand this wonderful Bewitched family that I've been lucky to be a part of the last 6 years. Samantha's 70s, now available on Amazon, despite the earlier hiccup today with the link not being live. It is available in print for now. There is going to be an ebook sometime around January, February. I should also mention that I, Samantha, Take This Mortal Darren is also available in print and ebook. Again, it's a great primer for Samantha's 70s. And of course, the ultimate linear guide that started it all for me. Oh my God, it's so heavy. The Bewitched Continuum is on Amazon as well in print and ebook. I hope you like Samantha's 70s. And that you'll leave a review on Amazon once you've had a chance to plow into it. Your support really, really does mean a lot to me, and that's something I don't think I say nearly often enough. Thank you all so much for your support and your love and your encouragement. From my home office here in Prince Edward Island, Canada, this is me, Adam Michael James, thanking you again for sharing this launch with me tonight. Like Samantha discussed with George Washington, exercise your rights. Vote while we still have those rights. Okay, just saying. Stay tuned for a playlist of some of the songs mentioned in Samantha's 70s. I'm going to post that here sometime next week. And they're all Black artists. I'm very proud of that. Thank you again. Thank you in advance for picking up a copy of Samantha's 70s. I hope you enjoy it. Good night. And as always, always remember your own magic. Stay safe.